I'd like to introduce you to Professor Tim Noakes. He needs no introduction, and we're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all very much for coming out this morning. I appreciate giving up your time to hear this message. It's not controversial, it's damaging to your health. I just warn you that. So, and I have to begin by explaining what my colleagues think of me, which is very important. But let's begin with the animal farm and what George Orwell wrote in the 1940s. At any given moment, there's an orthodoxy, a body of ideas of which it is assumed that all right-thinking people will accept without question. And in a sense, you'll see that that's what diet has become. Everyone knows what's good for you, and we don't question it. It's not exactly forbidden to say this, that, or the other, but it's not done to say it. Anyone who challenges the prevailing orthodoxy finds himself silenced with surprising effectiveness. A genuinely unfashionable opinion is almost never given a fair hearing, either in the popular press or in the highbrow periodicals. And I've discovered that. So what my own faculty, which sits a few miles from here, decided that they really needed to pull me in and rein me in and show that I was wrong. So they called out this expert from the United States, who's a South African, and some other experts, and I debated this guy, and then these three people said what they thought of me. These are my colleagues, and what they said was actually, it was terrible. It was, at first it was unethical what they said, but you'll see that it's also inflammatory, etc. So the one guy said he's a good scientist in his field, but he's way outside of his field and comfort zone. He doesn't understand the science and the whole concept, which means that he understands, but I don't understand. Okay, so that's fine. He's cherry-picked, which means you just take out little bits of information and misinterpret, going down a very dangerous path. Applying dietetic measures, he's doing harm and flouting the Hippocratic Oath. So he's telling another doctor that he's flouting the Hippocratic Oath. You can't say much more about a guy's ethics than that. And you'd expect better of Tim. He's a good reputation, so this is extremely dangerous. He's been afforded the public space to propound these ideas without scientific validity. And actually, in the debate, I presented 5 irrefutable facts, which you have to ask, so where are they saying I was wrong in what I said at the debate? That doesn't appear. But it's just, no, I'm wrong. So this is the statement. And this is called ad hominem, of course. It's attack of the person, not of the ideas, which what we want in science is to attack the ideas. Damage is being done. Damage is being done. So, and that's a really important statement. He's radically oversimplified things. She said, it was sad when a good scientist wandered off his area of expertise. Actually, I've been studying nutrition for 40 years. I have more publication in nutrition than she has. She doesn't have a PhD. I have 3. So she's never subjected herself to the scientific method, but she's judging me. He's lost the plot a little. He's not basing all his public statements on the best available evidence. Okay? So in other words, they have the best available evidence. And I'm going to show you the best available evidence that they use. He's right to question, etc. And he's entitled upon something he's totally believes in, but what's scary is that he's damaging patients and the population. So in other words, what they're saying does not damage the population and the patients, or they don't see it. Okay? So that's fundamental. So they are not damaging anyone with their ideas. In other words, they never wake up in the middle of the night and think, actually, maybe what I'm saying is wrong. They don't have that doubt. Remember, I followed their diet for 33 years, and all it did was give me diabetes. That's all it did. Okay? And I switched. Yeah. Okay, my overwhelmer is sadness that a person of his stature has made this mistake. In other words, we don't make mistakes. What we say is correct. There are no mistakes. And so you go to the public when you have irrefutable evidence that this is the right thing to do. Now, I'm going to show you the evidence for the change in the guidelines for eating that occurred in 1977. They claim you must have irrefutable evidence, and or conversely, that their arguments are based on irrefutable science. And I will show you the irrefutable science that they use to prove their argument. So remember that. So I'm wrong, but they're not wrong because they have irrefutable evidence. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's been afforded the public space to propound these ideas without scientific validity. And in fact, I presented, as I said, 5 irrefutable facts, which they did not address. She should have said, he's wrong because of this. But she doesn't say that. It's just, he's wrong. We don't have to explain why he's wrong, but he's wrong. And so it goes on. Noakes' theory has a potential to divert people from treatments that were known to be too good. That's a Freudian slip. Were known to be good. Why not are? Why not are known to be good? And were I still a faculty member at the University of Cape Town Medical School, I'd be very concerned about him undoing a lot of good work done in heart disease prevention. Well, actually, nothing's changed in heart disease prevention. We're now healthier because of this 30 years of so-called heart disease prevention, but we'll come to that. Okay, and so he goes on. There are no long-term data on that, while there are data on the conventional diet. Well, we'll see what the data on the conventional diet are. And again, they never question, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the comments, and I give them to you so that you're aware that what I'm telling you is considered very dangerous. So you have to decide, am I being dangerous or are they being dangerous? And you have the choice to make that decision. And okay. So the problem in the nutrition sciences is that no one answers the fundamental question. When you speak to nutritionists, they have no history. They do not look back in history. The advice they give you starts in 1977, and that's it. There's no history before that. It's as if nutrition science didn't exist before 1977. And the key question in nutritional science is, why do all creatures on Earth not eat the same foods? So why don't we eat the same food as this animal or this animal or this animal? Because we're all the same. We're all mammals. We share a lot of the 90% of our genes, or 80% of our genes are shared. So why don't we eat the same foods? How can this animal live on one plant, acacia plants? That's all it eats, acacia plants. Yeah. Diet in moderation. It doesn't have a moderate diet. This guy only eats bamboo shoots, this guy eats only eucalyptus. Is there moderation? So please never tell me that a diet in moderation is good. What would happen if we told this oak to start eating grass? He'd die just as quickly as anything. And the question is, which are we closest to? Okay, so the answer is each species can eat only that for which it's genetically programmed as a consequence of its coevolution. Coevolution, we co-evolve with specific groups of foodstuffs. So this animal has this long neck, and then it eats acacia plants because it has the advantage. No one else eats the acacia plants. Now, when they started eating acacia plants, many of these animals would have died, but the ones who survived are the ones who could survive eating that food. And similarly to humans, when we started changing our diet, things changed. And for example, 12,000 years ago, when we started eating cereals and grains for the first time, our health dramatically reduced, was dramatically worse. So if you look at the history of nutrition, humans were very healthy until 12,000 years ago. And I'll show you, we had no dental caries, we had no heart disease, nothing, no cancers. And then we introduced cereals and grains, and our health went immediately down. And it's thought that the only thing that saved us was milk. That there were those people who could metabolize milk, and they were the ones who survived, at least for a time. Okay, so we co-evolve with a specific group of foodstuffs in a specific environment, and critically, we produce a particular gut flora. And that's the basis for your health, is the bacteria you have in your gut. You have 10 trillion cells, bacteria in your gut. If they are not healthy, you're unhealthy. There's a specific balance that you require for them to be healthy. And the diets that we eat today have completely changed the bacterial flora in the gut. And in my opinion, still unproven, but this is the medicine of the future, the cause of ill health starts right here in the flora of the gut flora. And the veterinarians have known this all along. I was speaking to a lady yesterday, and she said that 30 years ago, she had an outbreak of a particular illness amongst her cows. And the doctor and the vet said to her, what you have to do is you have to take feces from healthy cows and make sure that the animals, and you just put it down their throats. Doesn't matter how you get it, you just get that feces down the throats of the sick animals. We are doing that in medicine today. There are certain diseases which are only curable by fecal transplant from healthy people. Medicine cannot cure them. And that is the way it's going. We will one day be eating healthy feces to make us healthy. Yeah. But if you follow the dietary advice I'm going to show you, you'll get the right bacteria. Okay. So conclude, if you can't determine with what foodstuffs a particular species co-evolved, or if you can, then you know the foods for which that species is optimally adapted. So that's the key. You have to understand. So let me remind you, a vet doesn't have to go and say, what food should the giraffe be eating? Because he knows. What food should a lion be eating? Because he knows. Our problem is that we can live on different diets because we come from apes that ate a purely vegetarian diet. And we've evolved with meat and protein only in the last 3 million years. So we have the capacity to live on a vegetarian diet. I'm not saying that's the best. Whereas these animals don't. They're completely specialists, but we're not specialists. And that's where the problem arises, because we can eat more foods than these animals can. Okay, so a key question is, modern humans eat a diet that's profoundly different from that with which we co-evolved. It's not possible to determine what is the optimum human diet today by comparing the health of humans, all of whom eat a diet for which they're not genetically adapted. So what the scientists try to do today, they look at people eating an inferior diet. And they say, well, these people who are eating more veg and less meat are healthier than this group. But the reality is that the diet's so bad, it's destroying the real effects. So that's our problem. All the research that's being done is being done on humans eating an inadequate diet. And rather, the research must be determined that with which each of our ancestors co-evolved, etc., that produced Homo sapiens. And the first person to look at that question was a chap called Weston Price. In 1900, he was working in Toronto. He was a dental surgeon. And guess what he noticed? He noticed dental caries suddenly appeared in the children. And he said, how is it possible that for generations these children didn't have dental caries and then suddenly appear? So he said, I'm going to go and find the populations where they're still eating the diets that they ate millions of years ago or thousands of years ago. And he traveled the world to find these isolated populations who ate no sugar, who ate no flour, who ate no processed foods. And he found these populations, and he has some pictures of them from all across the globe. He traveled from south to north, to east to west. And he took pictures, and he looked at their teeth, and he counted the dental caries. And he found that if you were eating a traditional diet, there was less than a 1% caries rates in all the teeth that he counted. Whereas if you're eating the modern diet, 90% of teeth had caries in them. That was the difference. But it was not the only difference. If you look at these people, you'll notice that they've got two characteristics, or three characteristics. Firstly, they've got very broad faces. The broad face is what you see in people eating traditional foods. As soon as you change to the food we eat, you get a thin face. And as soon as you get a thin face, you don't have enough space in your mouth for your teeth. So you have too many teeth in the face. So if you have too many teeth in your face, and you've had to have your wisdom teeth removed, it's because you ate too much carbohydrate as a child and not enough meat and protein. And the worse it is, so if you want to see how well nourished a community is, you just look at the faces. And if the faces are squashed in and the teeth are all disarrayed, they have terrible nutrition. And then they have dental caries as well. It's the simplest way to judge the quality of nutrition in any population. And I can tell you that the thinner the faces, the more dental caries, the greater the ill health in that population. So you compare the children living in Bishop's Court to those living in Kailicha or Guguletu, and you'll see what I mean. So that was the first thing. The broad face, perfect teeth, no caries, and they're all in place. They've got all the teeth they need. And then he noticed, like the Indian, the Eskimo thrives as long as he was not blighted by the touch of modern civilization. But with it, like all primitives, he withers and dies. I apologize for that word. He withers and dies. As soon as the diet was changed, they got sick. And these were the diseases that did not exist in those populations. These are the diseases. Now, you may look at this list and say, do you know, I've actually got this condition, like myself. But if I lived in that population, I wouldn't have it. And you might look here and you might find that you've got an autoimmune disease. And then you might say, but gee, maybe it is nutritionally based. And it's not because I'm just producing antibodies to my own tissues. you might be producing antibodies to proteins that are leaking across the gut from your bacterial flora, and that's what you'll find. So we have to ask, and Alzheimer's disease is a disease of carbohydrates. I can tell you that today, that if you want to avoid carbohydrates, stop eating all those carbohydrates. And the reason is this is type 3 diabetes. It's diabetes of the brain, and the brain is no longer able to metabolize carbohydrate. And when that happens, you're on the road to Alzheimer's disease. Multiple sclerosis is curable through dietary changes, but I'm taught you can't cure it. But it isn't. We've seen patients cure themselves by changing their diet. Okay. So these diseases of civilization and urbanization are nutritionally based, but you're not told that. You're told that it's the stress of living in Cape Town that causes all these diseases. That's not true. It's nutritional. Until you exclude the nutritional, you can't say that. The reason we do not accept it is because we cannot comprehend that primitives knew better than we do what to eat for optimal health. That's it. How could these people know that we knew better? So there we go. So price, sorry, that's double. I don't know why that appeared twice. I apologize for that. Here we go. Here's Weston Price. Absolute genius. Goes out to see the Australian Aborigines. These people are perfectly healthy in their environment. Put them in Sydney or other small town or big towns, they develop obesity, diabetes, all the conditions. You send them back into the environment, they disappear. And that experiment has been done. So the urbanization causes these people who are profoundly healthy. See his broad face and perfect teeth. Put that guy in a city and he's in trouble. Here's pictures from the Congo from his book. You see the guy's teeth, broad face, very broad face, perfect teeth, and he looks very happy. The same with the Maoris. The Maoris up to 100 years ago or 200 years ago were cannibals, yeah, and the Fijians as well. And if you want to see perfect human beings, go and see the Fijians who are not urbanized. They are unbelievable. And why do you think they give us trouble in rugby? Yeah, because they kept eating good foods for longer than, but go into the cities and the Fijians look terrible. And the Maasai, of course, who are completely, they only eat meat and protein. They have no vegetables. They've never seen a vegetable in their life, these people, or a fruit. But then what happens when, remember these pictures were taken in 1920. This is what happens as soon as sugar and the white man's food arrives. Now these people cannot live because they will develop infections and those will go into the brain and they will die as a consequence. So if we didn't have perfect teeth, in the past, we'd all be dead. And the only reason why we have teeth is because of fluoridization. The food we eat destroys our teeth, and we don't know it because of fluoridization. But if that's what our teeth should look like because of the foods we eat. Okay, so who are the healthiest people in 1800? Here they are, the Plains Indians, and the Spaniards left them horses, and they became expert hunters of the buffalo. And the bison is a lovely animal because it lives in cold environments and therefore it's got lots of fat. And these people sort out the fat in these animals. And any description you see them writing, they could tell you where the fat came in the body from its taste. So my point is these people searched for the fat and they produced a product called pemmican, which was made 1/3 fat and 2/3 meat. And they survived on that for years. If the bison didn't come back, they just lived on that. And pemmican was the driver of all the expeditions to the Arctic and the Antarctic, and it opened up Canada and the fur trade. The fur trade was dependent on pemmican because it is a perfect food and it's completely indestructible. It will last for years. I know a McDonald's burger will last for 20 years, but that's because of all the stuff they put in it. This was natural and survived. So there they are, and they were the tallest people in the world, and that's how you can judge how healthy they were. And the Australians were next, and this was the 1800s. And the Australians, guess what the Australians were eating when they first went to Australia? They were eating lamb because that's all they had. So anyway, and then other countries. And what happened? Along came the white man, and he wanted to take over America, so he shot out the bison. He knew that was the way to get rid of the Indians. So this was genocide, not just of buffalo, but of a whole culture. And what happened to the Plains Indians? They're the least healthy people in the world. So they go from being the healthiest in 1800 to the least healthiest in 21,000. And that's what they look like today. Yeah, and that's what happens. If you take away meat and protein from a population that is designed to eat that food, that's what happens. And so the US government spends hundreds of millions a year trying to find out what caused obesity. But that's what caused obesity. But they can't say that. So what do they say? They say these people cause their own obesity. And that's what industry does today. Industry says obesity is caused by you, not by us. Just like the US government won't take responsibility for the cause, because these people now live on reservations where they fed Coca-Cola and chips and cornflakes, etc., which is not what they're designed to eat. So now getting back to us. So most of you are pale-faced and you come from Europe. Your parentage comes from Europe. So let's go and look at the mid-Victorians. This is now your great-great-great-grandparents living in 1850 to 1870. What did they eat? And supposedly they had a bad diet. That was the theory. But in fact, between 1850 and 1870, they had the best diet because the food costs in Britain had come down and the working class could afford really good food. Lots of meat, protein, dairy produce, and vegetables. And this is 3 studies recently released. And this is how they ate and died, and this is what they looked like. This is the working class. Now, these people ate 2 to 3 times as many calories as we do because they were working hard. That's what they looked like, and that's the way you should look. If you don't look like that, then something's wrong, and I'll tell you what's wrong. And they ate, as I said, they ate 2 to 3 times as much as we do, and that meant they had nutrients coming into their body in pharmacological doses. So the vitamin C and the vitamin intake was huge. Guess what? How long did they live? They lived as long as we do. And there's one difference, that today we die slowly. And any gains that we have in longevity are purely because we just take so long to die today. So the medications that your doctor gives you for chronic illness do not prevent the disease, they do not cure it, they palliate it. And you still die from the same disease, but you just take 10 years longer to die. These people lived as long as we do. They went to bed at night one night and they woke up dead the next morning. And that's it. Yeah. Yeah. Now, you think of your own parents. This is how they go. They just go like that. My father went downhill over 15 years with his diabetes. And he lost his legs, strokes, etc. That's what medicine offers you today. There's no cures. And I'll tell you why there are no cures. So if you have an illness and you're taking medication, don't think that makes one iota of difference to the disease. Not at all. The disease just progresses on and on and on. And you're never told that. You're never told that the statins you're taking make essentially no difference to the outcome, the ultimate outcome in your heart disease. Essentially no difference. You live maybe 2 months longer if you take the drug for 10 years. Yeah. Okay. So, and this is what they died of. They died of other diseases, probably traumas, infections were prevalent, respiratory system diseases, but look at this, circulatory system and cancers. And they lived as long as we did. So don't tell me that they didn't live long enough to get heart disease. That's a typical explanation. That's bogus. They didn't get these diseases, and today that's what we die from, circulation and near-plaque cancers. So what's changed? Nutrition. So if you want to understand, in my view, these are nutritionally based diseases, even the cancers. And I'll maybe hope to explain that later. Hopefully, I mean, I don't hope there is anyone in the room with cancer, but let me tell you that in 1930, a chap called Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize for proving that cancer cells are fundamentally different from every other cell in your body. Fundamentally different. And they cannot burn anything but glucose. They cannot burn fats. They can only burn glucose. You're never told that. The diet for cancer is a high-fat diet where you starve the cancer cells of glucose. And there are a whole lot of anecdotes and early clinical trials showing reversal of cancer after the people have gone through their medical treatments by going on this diet. So I'm not suggesting it's a solution, but if I had cancer, there's only one diet I would eat. And that's biologically based. It has to work. If anything's going to work, the diet will work. Okay. What happened in South Africa, we had the rinderpest came along. And it wasn't the Southern government that shot out the cattle, it was the rinderpest. So the rinderpest arrived in the Horn of Africa in 1889 and spread right through to Cape Town by 1897. It wiped out most of the cattle, and that had a fundamental change in South Africa, because what happened was it killed the food of the African people. The loss of a large number of their cattle caused considerable social and economic distress in African communities. With the disappearance of the source of meat and milk, Africans experienced considerable hardship, in some cases starvation. And the consequence was that they were forced to go to the cities and take up the labor, the mines, etc. And so they changed their diet from one which was based on meat and milk to one which became the white man's diet. And as a consequence, they've shown the same changes that the Indians of North America did. So it was the same effect. And what happened was, what's the first bad thing they started doing, as you do when you go to cities, is you start eating more sugar. And sugar, as you know, was started to be promoted in 1700. It was the basis for the British Empire. We would not be here without sugar. Slavery and sugar drove the British Empire. And you need to go and read up that history. It's a dreadful history. So sugar is still causing trouble. So sugar consumption rose dramatically and has just increased. So that today, in 2 weeks, people eat as much sugar as they used to in a year in the 1800s. Yeah. And we'll say sugar has no redeeming values. Now, what G.D. Campbell showed, he was a South African physician in Durban. He was the first person in the 1960s to ask the question, is sugar healthy or good for you? And he started a diabetic clinic, the first diabetic clinic in Natal. And he noticed that amongst the patients who came to see him, the majority were town dwellers and very few came from the country. Then he went out into the country and he found that at the Shawi Hospital, there were very few cases of diabetes, almost unknown, unheard of. But then he also looked at the Indian population and he found that the rate of diabetes in the Natal Indians, who'd come from, obviously, India, was tenfold higher than the ancestor populations in India. And the difference was that they were eating 7 times as much sugar. So he concluded that sugar was probably the cause. And he next noticed that these were the people he treated with diabetes, the Xhosa speakers the Zulu speakers who had diabetes. And he noticed that it took time before the diabetes appeared. You had to be in the city for a period of time. And it was usually about 20 years. After 20 years, then you started getting the disease. And that's typical for diabetes. It probably takes a long exposure before it becomes apparent. And other people subsequently showed exactly the same in other parts of the world. And so this is how sugar consumption has increased in the world since the 1700s. And notice diabetes rates almost unheard of until 1900. And the only diabetes cases that occurred in this period occurred in the wealthy people, usually the wealthy British, because they were the ones who could afford the sugar. But today, that's the incidence of diabetes, and that's the sugar consumption. So the two track each other very, very accurately. My own view is that sugar is not the sole cause, that this also matches a change in our carbohydrate consumption. It's the total carbohydrate load that's probably, this is a marker of that. The more sugar in your diet, the more carbohydrate, and maybe other things. So it's not necessarily just the sugar, it's carbohydrate as well. And of course the sugar industry says that's rubbish, that sugar is very healthy and so on. So if you want to see the opposing opinion, and this is remarkable because I tell everyone I speak to, including the scientists, they must read these 2 books. And you too need to read these books. And it's not Tim Noakes. I was inspired by this guy, Gary Torbs, who's since become a friend. He wrote this book in 2007. It's sold in exclusive books under the heading The Diet Deception. That's the other name of it, The Diet Deception. But if you want to understand nutrition, this is the book. And all he did, he's a journalist. He had no bias whatsoever, but he spent 5 years writing the book and researching it. And fantastic book. And he shows how nutrition changed in 1977 on the basis of too little evidence. And if you are taking cholesterol-lowering agents and you believe that cholesterol causes heart disease, this is a 400-page book. There are many with a similar title. This was originally 1,300 pages. It was a book written for the medical profession, and he cut it down to 400 pages so that for the general public. And he looks at all the evidence. Now, all the evidence against cholesterol. Now, he could fill 1,300 pages. Now, if you go and ask anyone who provides you with statins, they will not know one page of that book. They won't know one piece of negative evidence against statins, not one. But yet there are 1,300 pages of negative evidence. So why don't they tell you? That's the question. Why don't they tell you? And the thing's called conflict of interest. And you need to ask anyone who speaks, what's your conflict of interest? Okay, I have no funding from industry on this topic at all. But you have to ask. And when you go to your cardiologist, you say, what's your conflict of interest? What relationship do you have with the people making statins? Just ask them that question. And you have to get a clarification on that point. So the current model in medicine, this is where medicine went wrong. And in fact, the greater threat I pose to medicine is not about nutrition. It's a much deeper question. And the deeper question is, why have we changed the way we practice medicine in the last 30 years? And the practice of medicine has changed fundamentally. And in the past, we used to look for multiple causes for disease. Now we don't. We look for one cause. And that's fine if it's an infectious disease. So medical doctors are brilliant if you have an infection or an acute trauma. Medicine is astonishingly good at that. But if you have a chronic condition, it's useless. It's completely useless because it uses the same model for acute and chronic disease. And so there's one condition, one cause, one treatment. So if you have typhoid, that works brilliantly because typhoid is caused by bacteria, and if you cure the bacteria, you're fine. But chronic disease is not like that. Chronic disease has multiple causes, and you can't isolate one. But the pharmaceutical industry over the past 30 years has brainwashed my profession and controls my profession. It absolutely controls my profession. I could not stand here in front of you and say this if I was a professor of medicine at Groote Hospital, or if I was a professor of diabetes, or a professor of cardiology, because the pharmaceutical industry would cut all my funding and my department would collapse overnight. That's it. So the only reason I can say it is because I'm an exercise physiologist. And and you have to understand that. Because I'm completely independent of the pharmaceutical industry, I can tell you what I'm saying. That's why you have to ask for conflict of interest whenever you hear anyone speak.
It's really scary.
Yeah, it is. It is. I can tell you that the pharmaceutical industry controls the medical profession. Absolutely. Absolutely. But please understand, acute conditions, medicine's brilliant. If you have a chronic illness, you better to stay away. Yeah. Because what's happened is, you see, it's heart disease, high cholesterol, one treatment, statin. So what we try to do is make everything in one treatment, which is a pharmaceutical treatment. So medical students are brought up today believing this. They are taught how to medicate you, and with treatments that don't work. But they're taught that they work. Now, I'm just going to give you one example. If some of you will have gone to your doctor and you'll have had your cholesterol measured. Let me tell you, if you're a woman, you should never have your cholesterol measured. That's an absolute statement. Do not have your cholesterol measured. Because in women, cholesterol in the blood has no predictive value on heart attack risk in women. In men, it has a small predictive value, but in men under 50. So if medicine was scientifically based, the only people we would test for cholesterol would be men below 50. But we don't. We measure everyone, and we treat everyone. As soon as the cholesterol goes above 5, we treat you. Okay. So let's say I had 1,000 people, and I treated them for 5 years because they had a cholesterol of 5.1, or 5, or 6, or 7, or 8, or 9. So I take 1,000 people, and I treat them for 5 years. Now, how many people of those 1,000 are going to benefit? Now, because in the audience some of you will be taking statins. Now, my question is, how much benefit do you want? In other words, If I treated 1,000 and 1,000 benefit, we'd all take the drug. Logically, it's going to help us. But if it's only 900 of 1,000, would we take a drug? And most audience will say yes. 800, 700, 600. And the cutoff is always 500. People say, okay, if I've only got a 1 in 2 chance of benefiting, I probably wouldn't take the drug. That's a 1 in 2. In other words, 500 of 1,000 benefit. Now you want to know what actually is the number. It turns out, in 5 years, 18 of 1,000 will benefit. That is statistically proven. In fact, it's gone up from 15 to 18. They managed to squeeze it up to 18 recently. So 18 people of 1,000 will benefit. Paper came out last month showing that if you do that population and study them as well for complications, and you look at diabetes, 18 have benefited. How many have got diabetes? 125 have got diabetes as a consequence of that treatment. Yeah, so it's unethical to use statins in people who are healthy. Even if you have heart disease, the benefits are marginal. They really are marginal. So I hope I've opened your minds now to realize that if you're going to take statins, read the books. Go on the internet, find these books and read them. And analyze whether, in fact, you're at greater risk or not.